Hello, and welcome to the Thyroid Pharmacist Healing Conversations podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Izabella Wentz, PharmD, your thyroid pharmacist. And today we're going to do a bit of a deep dive on women's hormones with America's Holistic Gynecologist, Dr. Shawn Tassone. Welcome, Dr. Tassone. How are you doing?
Good. It's great to see you in person.
Thank you so much for coming in and making your way here. I'm going to tell people a little bit about you before I start asking you some questions. Dr. Shawn Tassone is known as America's Holistic Gynecologist. He's the first physician in the United States to be double board certified in obstetrics and gynecology and by the American Board of Integrative Medicine. He holds a medical degree in addition to a PhD in mind-body medicine. He's a practicing OB/GYN in the Austin area, hormonal expert, author, speaker, highly rated patient advocate, creator of the world's first integrative hormonal mapping system, and host of the Confessions of a Male Gynecologist podcast. You guys can definitely check out my episode there, which I think aired about 2 years ago or so. In his 20 plus years of practice, he's listened to over 50,000 women's stories and is determined to remove the myths surrounding women's health. As an integrative health practitioner, he believes that you should have an active role in your care. His work includes studies and publications on hormonal imbalances, spirituality and medical care, whole foods to heal the human body, and integrative medicine. He's been featured in many publications, including the New York Times, NBC News Online, Stanford MedX, to name a few. His latest book, The Hormone Balance Bible, which I endorsed and wrote a little intro for, was published by HarperCollins, and it's available for purchase worldwide. It's a really, really excellent book.
Oh, thank you.
I have to tell you, I don't think you even know this because I endorsed your book many, many years ago. And then I went through perimenopause, and that was the first book that I looked at.
Oh, thank you.
And I realized I am a mother archetype.
Yes. Okay. We got it.
We got it. And I followed the strategies in your book, and they were a really, really big game
Thank you.
changer.
It's very nice.
I haven't told you this. I wanted to tell you this in person.
That's actually, I'm not one to cry, but that's very nice. You know how it is when you put all that time and effort into a book, even having one person, I mean, yours was a New York Times bestseller, so you understand probably better than I do, but just putting that out there into the world and having even one person, that's really gratifying to know that, what came out of your head is helping somebody else.
Yeah.
And the beautiful thing is, for me, not being a woman, obviously, is that you are being helped by the stories of the women that I've helped. That's where the book came from, was not from necessarily me, but from the stories that I heard, and that's where the archetypes came from.
I really love the archetypes that you talk about. Can we give a little bit of insight on what they are, the different archetypes of women that I guess you've encountered on their hormonal journeys, right? When their hormones are out of balance and how that might present?
Sure. I mean, the reason that I even came up with the archetypes, it's what I noticed was in my practice, if I told a woman, like say, for instance, you had estrogen dominance, or your estrogen was really high, your progesterone was really low. It was, people would understand it, they would get it, but they weren't connecting. I didn't feel like I was connecting. And what I started doing, what I noticed I was doing, is I was starting to tell the stories of the other patients, like, the story of the mother would be a combination of the two archetypes of the queen and the unbalanced heroine. So that's estrogen dominance with low progesterone. And the reason that I came up with the names was the queen. Obviously, you think of estrogen being the dominant female hormone. Well, what's a very dominant female figure? A queen. Progesterone being the hero's journey for a woman, the heroine's journey of pregnancy. And when it's low, you're unbalanced. You're an unbalanced heroine. And then the mother is a queen in her own right, and she's a heroine, but she's unbalanced. And that's where the two came together. And what I did, I was reading a lot at the time, Caroline Myss and Jung, and then Sally Hogshead, who you know really well. And they all talked about archetypes, and it was just stories. And I thought, Well, gosh, I have all these imbalances and they all have stories. Why don't I put them together? Like the testosterone deficiency, I call the none, because you don't want none and you ain't getting none. No, I'm just, but
No libido.
no libido. And then things like, for somebody like you'd be familiar with hypothyroidism, I call that the underdog because those women can't live up to their potential. As you tell in your story about how you struggled for years and years and years just to be normal, and you have all this potential that you couldn't achieve. You were, after you figured it out, you wrote the book, you started doing all this stuff. You weren't living up to your potential. So those women are underdogs. And when you start telling those stories, if I tell the Izabella Wentz story to a patient that's got Hashimoto's, they click immediately. Versus me just saying, "Oh, your antibodies are elevated and your T3 is low," which is just sounds so scientific. But the connection with the story is kind of where I started seeing light bulbs and tears and all these things. And women were just saying to me, like, nobody's ever explained it to me like that, or wow, I totally get it. And that's when I was like, I should write something. This should be in print. So I started the book.
Yeah, and it just makes so much sense, and when I was reading through the different archetypes, like, I just really connected, and it was interesting because I was connecting with 2 of them, and the mother was actually the double whammy of 2 conditions, right?
But it's fascinating. You know how when you write a book, they're really concerned about the cost of the book. And my book was reaching, they wanted me to cut it down to 6 archetypes. And I'm like, I really can't. Actually, I was going to make more. And they're
Yeah.
like, well, you might want to cut it at 12 because I could combine a bunch of them to make even more. And I didn't have the ability to do that. So I include, there's 3, I believe, that I combined to make there's 9. And then I combined 6 of them together to make the other 3. But yeah, I had to cut it off at 500 pages because they were getting upset.
Oh man, I know what that's like. I've been writing a book on irritable bowel syndrome for what it feels like 10 years, and I've had to cut it down so many different times. It's like publishers do need to make money
Yeah.
and they want to make sure they're not spending $1,000 on every time they print your book. But you have so much wonderful knowledge to
Thank
share.
you.
And I really appreciate you putting that in book form for many of us that we can pick up and read through and help ourselves. What are the top 3 hormonal imbalances among women if you had to pick 3?
The first one, Head and Shoulders. In my book, I have a quiz, and it's
Mhm.
not like everybody's got a quiz, but mine is about 36 questions, and I have it mathematically weighted on the back end. And the number one, I've had probably 28,000 women take the quiz, and far and away, and I see this in my practice, low testosterone, which
Mm.
would be the none. Fatigue, decreased drive, motivation, desire, workouts suffer. I would say the second one that I see probably most commonly is the wise woman, which is just estrogen deprivation and the menopausal state, and then thyroid, that subclinical hypothyroid Hashimoto's state where maybe they haven't been diagnosed before or they're under medicated, or they're just using Synthroid and they don't feel good, which is almost every woman on Synthroid. And those would be the underdogs. So that's the top 3 that I see in my practice.
Interesting. So you've had about 28,000 women take that.
Yeah.
Amazing. What do you think are some of the most common misconceptions surrounding women's health and hormones?
One I think would be, and it's getting a lot of attention now because of the magnitude, the number of women that are now in perimenopause. But the aspect that you have to suffer, one, when you're diagnosed with menopause, I was just seeing this yesterday, that you have to wait 12 months without a period to be diagnosed with menopause. That's the typical medical definition. So that means like if you feel horrible for 9 months and you don't have a period, and then all of a sudden you have a little bleed, the clock starts over again. And that's just totally not true. You can diagnose menopause with labs, symptoms, and you can definitely help before you are full blown menopause. I think one of the other big misconceptions is that hormones are bad, like they cause cancer or they're medications. I wish they weren't medications in the sense that it's not like you're taking Motrin or a statin or something that's foreign to your body. These are hormones that you've had your entire life, and I'm just giving them back to you, or we're just adding more than what your body is naturally making. I spend a lot of time in my practice trying to get women over this aspect that it's a medicine, that you're having to take or that you're a failure because you have to take it. Women really are, and I think society has done this to women. You have to just walk it off. I mean, like my grandmother, the World War II woman whose husband went off to war, and they were machinists and all, and they just had to tough it out. There was no menopause back then. I asked my grandma when she was like 80, what did you do? And she's like, what the hell is menopause?
Wow.
Because that's just how they were. But they were suffering at the same time. They just suffered in silence. And women don't want to suffer anymore. And I'm glad to see that. So I think one of the big misconceptions is you have to wait and you have to suffer.
Yeah, I find it very interesting. I feel in recent years it's come to light how few studies are being done for women, right? We have all of these wonderful libido
Hmm.
drugs for
Oh
men,
yeah, yeah.
and yet there are a lot of women's health conditions that are very commonly ignored.
Well, it's, you see the blue pill, right? And
Yep.
now there's a pink pill for women. And what's interesting is that it's all marketing because the pink pill still is an antidepressant. It's in that
Yep.
category of antidepressants. So we're still telling women it's all in their head, even with that pill. It's not marketed that way. They're playing off of the Viagra. Actually, I'm in my research on Viagra, even I think initially it was studied for women. That was one of the things that they were trying to look into,
Interesting.
but it ended up being for men anyways. And even the pink pill that's out there now, the studies were done on men, and then they just moved it into women because they saw a possibility for it. So women's research, as you're aware, is really lacking. It's still lacking. I don't see anything on the horizon FDA wise. There's a new FDA approved oral testosterone coming out for men, not for women. The FDA approved testosterone drugs for men. Some doctors are using them on women, like androgel, but it's a man's dose. And some of these docs will say, just take a little pea-sized amount and put it on your. It's still too much. It's just too high of a dose. And so all we have right now, which I'm fine with, but a lot of docs won't do it, is compounded hormones. Mhm.
Testosterone. A lot of women listening might think this is a man's hormone. What is he talking about women being testosterone deficient? Can we get into that?
Yeah, sure. So the number one circulating hormone in a woman at most stages of her life is testosterone. The highest amount of hormone in her body is always testosterone, not estrogen, not progesterone. Just by sheer, nanograms per deciliter. And we don't ever talk about that. Women feel like if they're on testosterone, they've been made to believe that they're going to be big and bulky. They're going
Grow
to
a
be hairy,
mustache.
grow a mustache, be sweaty and stinky and all these things. And the fact of the matter is the range for a woman, say on a free testosterone, which is the active form in your body, is zero point 0.2 to 6.4. Now, mathematically, that's a 32-fold range. That's enormous. That is massive. And to say if you come in and your free testosterone is zero point 0.2, that's normal. You should feel fine. Well, I could multiply that by 32 and you'd still be normal, but you might feel a heck of a lot better. And so the goal with testosterone replacement for women is seeing. I always look at hormones like this. You're either in the house or you're not in the house, normal or abnormal. Most women, I would say, are probably in the house, but you could be laying on the floor in the basement of the house, and maybe you'd feel better on the main floor or towards the attic. But we don't look at it like that. We look at it as either black or white. And I can't tell you how many women I've moved even from, say, one on a free testosterone to three, which is a threefold increase, and they feel like a completely different person. So the goal should be to keep you in that normal range and to see where you feel better. I always look at labs, same with thyroid. People always ask, like, well, what's the optimal? Well, optimal is where you feel best.
Yeah.
But I still shoot for that normal range because outside the normal is where you start seeing maybe some negative side effects. So that's why I'm not a big fan of like pellets and stuff, is just because now you're three times the normal, and that's where negative things can happen. So it's looking at it as it's totally necessary for bones, muscle, mood, just libido, which we know is part of life and happiness. And it's probably the most important hormone, I would say, besides estrogen for females.
Interesting. And why do you think so many women, and I mean, honestly, there's men that are deficient in testosterone nowadays, where I've seen some stats, and I don't know how accurate they are. I haven't done a lot of fact checks that men's testosterone levels in this
Mhm.
generation are getting lower with time. Do you find that typically we think of a lot of hormones declining
Mhm.
with age, and that could be absolutely the reason. Are there other reasons why you might find testosterone might have tanked in women?
I think for women, I see it across all age groups from the 18. I just said a 17-year-old this morning that was low,
Wow.
and the number one reason for younger women is birth control pills,
Yeah.
because the ethinyl estradiol drives down your free testosterone by raising sex hormone binding globulin, and we know now that young girls that are on birth control pills have decreased libidos.
Of
Um,
course.
and so that's one thing. As women age, perimenopause and menopause, and then probably the same for men, one thing we have to look at is weight. How much do you weigh? As obesity numbers go up, testosterone is going to go down. I think it's the neuroendocrine disruptors in the food supply, in the plastics, and all the things that we put on our skin, especially females. You're wearing lipstick, I'm sure it's organic and safe, but not a lot of women don't do that. And so you're consuming it. We put hormones on the skin because they absorb. I just did a thing yesterday and on hand sanitizers and how those are neuro. I mean, and we leave those on our hands. We don't wash
Yeah.
them off, and they just soak in. And so that probably has something to do with it. I think lifestyles are horrendous now. We don't sleep. We're workaholics. We women especially, they're out there in the workforce, CEOs doing all the things, working 12-hour shifts, and then they're coming home, they're making dinner, they're still in those domestic roles where the man thinks when he comes home he just can sit on the couch, and there isn't that partnership, or it's a single woman, and she's still taking care of all the kids. And I think that they're just cortisol can keep up for a while, but then it eventually starts burning out. And I always just say it's that concept of not just burning the candle at both ends, but doing it with a blowtorch, and you
Yeah.
just don't have anything left.
Yeah. Yeah. I just feel like a lot of times people don't know what they're putting on their body is not the same that it used to be.
Oh,
I was using hand sanitizers like all the time, working in the pharmacy, you're constantly having to clean your hands and you've got people sneezing on you every 3 minutes.
I had two nurses reach out to me yesterday. I put it on like 10 times a day because
Yeah.
they're going from room to room cleaning their hands, or they're in the OR and they're
Yeah.
cleaning their hands. It's insane what they have to put up with.
Yeah, triclosan was an ingredient
Yep.
that was in hand sanitizers back in the day, and that was found to be a thyroid hormone disruptor. It's been removed ever since, but there's a lot of other ingredients like this. I actually once got arsenic toxicity from lipstick,
Mm.
and women can get lead poisoning from lipstick. It's just like incredible that the amount of chemistry we have out there that's interfering with our biology and we don't even know it. I feel like, with birth control, I feel like, I mean, just looking at my experience, it's like it's kind of known that I would expect if you're taking birth control that's going to alter your hormones, right?
Mhm.
But you don't expect that putting on lipstick or hand sanitizer is going to change your hormones.
I had a friend who was in a program for doctors that had abuse issues. And part of the thing you have to do when you're in that program is you have to drop urine screens randomly.
Mm.
And they told him that he couldn't use the hand sanitizers in the operating room because it would make you test positive for alcohol. So okay, you're not drinking alcohol, but you're putting it on your skin and it still comes up positive. And if it can come up positive days later, how long is it in your fat? Because fat does store a lot of these toxic chemicals. So if you're more overweight, you're going to store more of these chemicals. You start losing weight, you're releasing all those chemicals, but you're not necessarily binding them. And so I think it definitely, I always say the hormonal system, as you're aware, is very intricate. Takes a lot of energy for your body to run that. So if it's got to run your heart and your brain to survive and your gut to digest food, if your body is super stressed, one of the first systems that's going to get hit is your hormonal system, because it takes a lot of energy. And if you don't have that, it's going to shut that down, because you only need thyroid and cortisol to survive. You don't need testosterone or estrogen or progesterone. You can, your body's going to shunt away to different systems, which is exactly what it does when you're under stress.
Yeah, it's interesting. When I learned about that whole pathway, I was just like, oh, this makes a lot of sense. Of course, your body's going to prioritize survival.
Hmm.
And this is how we could end up being young individuals, right? Not necessarily having gone through menopause, but you can still have hormonal
Oh, of
imbalances.
course.
With regard to estrogen, I know when I was in pharmacy school, I used to give out a ton of Premarin at the pharmacy, and all of a sudden, one day, it
You're
stopped.
dating yourself if you talk
I
about
am dating
Premarin.
myself. And, there was a study that came out about estrogen, and a lot of women were on hormone replacement, but for a while, there was this study that came out that talked about how hormone replacement could be problematic.
Hmm.
What are your thoughts on all
Women's
of
Health
that?
Initiative was probably the single most detrimental thing that happened to women in the last 20 years. It showed that Prempro, which was the combination of equine or equine estrogen, CEEs, conjugated equine estrogen, which is from horses,
Horse urine?
combined with medroxyprogesterone, which in my opinion is one of the worst drugs ever invented, had an increased risk of breast cancer. Now, the risks, unfortunately, were only like 1 in 1,000. It wasn't like astronomical, and it was already in the package insert. We already knew that. The estrogen only arm, the CEE arm, did not have an increased risk of cancer. It was just the combination of the two. There was actually also a decrease in colon cancer rates of 50%, but none of that actually ever made the public arena because it wasn't good news. It was, they only wanted to publish the bad news. But unfortunately, what happened was it scared people so much that it completely obliterated an entire generation of women and physicians, because the doctors became so petrified of giving a woman cancer
Yeah.
that it lingers today. I mean, even though I just did an analogy today, it would be like comparing. It's a bad analogy, but it's like apples to oranges. It's like you can't say that an apple causes cancer, so does an orange, because it's a fruit. And that's what you're saying when you compare a conjugated equine estrogen to a bioidentical estrogen. They're just simply not the same. I look at CEE or Premarin as an endocrine disruptor. It's not estrogen. So it's going to hit that lock so much harder as a key that it's just going to make something else happen. And then the medroxyprogesterone added to it, makes it even worse. But to put that fear to rest, a study came out the last summer that said women over the age of 65, and it was 10.2 million women, so it was huge. 65 and older that were on estradiol had lower rates of breast, colon, and lung cancers. They had less dementia, and they lived longer. And I try to tell women this all the time, and it's what's interesting is I talked about that. I did a podcast on it because I thought it was a great study. And I just, as I do with everything, I put my podcast on YouTube, and that one video for me went viral. I've never had that happen before. And the women that were consuming that video were like 65 to 75. And I was so amazed and empowered that women that were in that age group were on YouTube. And I can't tell you how many women since then have been calling me because they're miserable, even in their 70s. I have one lady that's 82, and she's been surviving, but she's not living her life. She's got osteoporosis, she doesn't feel good, and nobody's helping her. And she's like, if I only have 5 years left or 10 or what, I want to live. I don't want to be miserable and feel like I can't get out of bed. And so that one study, and it still lingers. I can't tell you how many times I'll have a patient who will see her PCP after I get her feeling better than she has in a decade, and they tell her to go off of it. And that, even though they trust me, that one little seed makes them distrust the whole process, because this one person or a friend will say, "Oh, you shouldn't be on that. It causes cancer." Well,
Yeah.
it doesn't. We know it doesn't cause cancer. Now, if you have a breast cancer cell in your body, we could stimulate the growth of that, but the cancer needs to be there already. It's not a cause.
Yeah, I feel like people like the C word, cancer, is
Hmm.
very, very
Sure.
scary, and people hear that and they go into fight or flight.
Yep.
But when you get into the details, the pharmacology is different, right? From bioidentical estrogen and
Yeah.
progesterone. And I feel like people use the terms interchangeably.
Mhm.
So they might just call synthetics progesterone, but it's actually progestin.
Yep.
Can you talk about some of the ingredients for people listening at home if they're wondering, like what are the names of the bioidenticals if they're wondering if they're on the right stuff or
Probably 95% of the estrogen on the market today that's commercially available through like Walgreens or CVS is bioidentical.
Mhm.
Patches, if it says estradiol on the package, it's bioidentical. The only one that I'm aware of that's still available commercially is Premarin, and it will say on there Premarin because it's a brand name. The Premarin has been the only drug in the last 30 years that has never gone generic. And
Hmm.
the reason that it can't go generic is because in order for a generic company to have to reproduce it, they have to know all the ingredients. And the company that made Premarin, which was Wyeth Ayerst, they can list 18, but they can't list the other like 32 that are in there because they can't, they've never biologically quantified them. So they can't ever go generic. And so that's why it's never gone generic, which is fascinating to me. Um, so those are bioidentical. Now, if you look at the other one that's commercially available, is called ethinyl estradiol, which is what's in birth control pills. Progestins are the sneaky ones, and if you notice, they name them very similar. So like ethinyl estradiol, so you think it's estradiol, but
Yeah.
it's not. Um, if it's just got to say estradiol or 17 beta estradiol or something like that. If it's if it's a progestin, it could say something like medroxyprogesterone, levonorgestrel, drospirenone. It doesn't have progesterone. If it just says progesterone, then it's bioidentical. And unfortunately, the progesterones are still pretty sneaky. So you could get, um, there is a patch you can use that is a bioidentical estrogen, but it's a progestin that's with it.
Mm.
So they're trying. The problem is, and you know this probably better than I do, there isn't a whole lot of money to be made in bioidentical hormones. They're naturally occurring.
Can't patent them, right?
Can't patent them because they're natural. And the only thing they can patent then is what? The delivery system. So they can patent the patch, but a pill, they're not going to make any money on. So nobody's ever going to study them and nobody's ever going to mass produce them because there's no money to be made, at least from what I can tell.
Yeah, it's been really, really frustrating as a pharmacist to to see that. And even working in pharmaceutical sales, I had a stint of doing that for a little while, just understanding how we're gonna do this, but we're not gonna do this because
Yeah.
it's not about doing the right thing, it's about doing the profitable thing, right?
Well, the problem is the FDA, in order to get something through the FDA, I don't know how many millions of dollars you have to spend.
It was like
Tens. Yeah.
$1 billion when I was in pharmacy
Yeah.
school and last year.
So they
And
have to spend that much just to bring it to the market. They
yeah,
got to make money on it, or they're no,
absolutely.
no. That's their business model, and you can't fault them for that. I think they would do it if it didn't cost as much. It's not going to cost them a ton to do the study. They've got to do it, and then they got to redo it. They got to do it 4 or 5 times, and you know, and then as we all know, the FDA, most of them have been on the boards of some pharmaceutical company at some point in their lives. It's really nobody trusts it, you know. But as a physician, when they bring you the study, you know that in the back of your mind, the study was funded by the company that spent $1 billion. So it's not like they're going to come out and say, "Oh, it doesn't work," or it has all these complications. So it's just a horrible system. And as a physician, you're kind of stuck. It's like, who do I believe? I kind of have to believe the FDA because I want to trust them, but I want to do what's right for my patients as well. It's just a horrible system.
Yeah, I feel like it takes like really listening to your patients to be able to serve them. I know a lot of times people with hypothyroidism or hormonal imbalances have gone to see doctors
Hmm.
and they're like, just take this medication. This is going to solve all of your problems. And of course, I'm thinking of levothyroxine, which
Hmm.
Some people do amazing with it
Hmm.
with hypothyroidism. And in pharmacy school, I learned that everybody does amazing with it. And in the real world, majority of people don't properly convert
Yeah.
levothyroxine to the more active thyroid hormone. And so in the real world, we actually, yeah, actually there is value in utilizing T3 or natural desiccated thyroid. Um, do you have any strategies for how women can convince their doctors when their doctors aren't listening?
I get that question a lot.
Yeah.
And if I'm being blunt, I always say you won't convince them. And if you need to convince them, you need to find another doctor. Only because most physicians, especially, and I can only speak to gynecologists, but most OBGYNs that are still delivering babies are busy. They see 50 patients in a day. Um, the high ticket value is going to be obstetrics because you're getting a lot of money for that delivery. And to have a woman come in that wants to have a discussion about drawing labs, which they doctors usually don't want to do, giving me liothyronine or and a natural desiccated thyroid, or I'm not sleeping. Can I be on progesterone? The reason they put you on a birth control pill, I'm pretty sure, is because it's easy. And I call birth control pills the get out of my office medicine because it's a 5-minute visit. Okay, try this. If it doesn't work, call me back. Well, they're not going to call you back because they're going to be upset and they're going to find someone else. Those are the doctors that they're telling you by their actions they're just not interested. And I don't fault them for that. I didn't come to this place in my career by chance. I think I just, certain people will listen. And I came out of residency like that. I did birth control pills for everything because that's how I was trained. You were trained,
Yeah.
you know how it was. And, but you come to it because you're interested, right? I mean, we come to this place because of either personal things or we just have that kind of mind where we're open to stuff. And you need to find those doctors. But if you can advocate for yourself, find people like me or you that are out there talking about the different kind of labs, like I had a lady today who I have on estrogen, and her level looked great, but she said to me, "I feel better at the higher dose. When you move me down to the smaller dose on the patch, the bioidentical patch, I start having muscle aches again." And I could have said, "Nah, you're fine." But I said, "Oh, okay. Well, you know your body better than I do. And there's nothing wrong with going up. There is another patch you could be on. And if you feel better on it, why not put you on it?" If that resonates with you, great. Do I resonate with every single person? No. I mean, because, that's just the nature of the beast. But I try to be open to that. Some doctors, if they're putting up the hand, then you probably just need to find somebody else.
I agree with you. I think that's very wise advice. And that's oftentimes the questions that I get from people is like, how do I get my doctor to prescribe this kind of medication? And I'm always like, you don't.
Yeah.
You do not want to be their first patient
No.
on this medication. You want to find a doctor that actually knows how to use it. And one of my hacks is I tell people to visit their local compounding
Yep.
pharmacist and ask them like which doctors know how to use hormones,
Yep.
which doctors are really good at managing thyroid conditions because they're the ones that make the
Yeah.
compounds and they can tell you who's been around for a while and who really knows what they're doing versus the person that has never done it before,
And
right?
I love the doc. I have patients that come in and they'll say, "My doctor was really helpful.
Yeah,
She really wanted to help me. She flat out told me she doesn't know how to dose this stuff. And so she called the pharmacist, and the pharmacist helped her with my prescription, but I'm just not quite where I want to be."
yeah,
So sometimes they'll come to me just for like to find that right dose. But kudos to the doc for being open
yeah.
and and as you know, for a doctor to call a pharmacist for help with our egos, that's a pretty big deal. So that shows you that person's trying. And you got to start somewhere, right? And that's how I learned. I called my local pharmacist when I was in Tucson, and she showed me how to do stuff, um, you know, 16, 17 years ago. So we all have to start somewhere. And there's a lot of patients that are kind enough to let you be that, to be the guinea pig, if you will, because they might live in a small town and they just don't know where to go, or they don't have, because people like me I couldn't survive taking insurance. spending 30 minutes with somebody. It just wasn't working. So I only take cash, and some people can't afford it, which is horrible for, I feel bad, but that's the nature of the beast. And so sometimes you have to start with somebody like that.
Yeah, yeah, and now with the advent of telemedicine,
Oh,
though,
it's great.
people are not necessarily destined to see their small town doctors, and I know you've expanded to a lot of
Yeah.
states beyond Texas, right?
Best thing that happened out of COVID
Yeah.
was telemedicine.
Yeah.
And what I found that's really fascinating, I did it to survive. Like I would have gone out of business had I not gone. I was already doing about 20% telemedicine, but then we went 100%. And like you said, you can reach and now with the IMLCC, where I can get licensed in so many different states and not have to fill out millions of papers to do it. It's been easy, and you can reach so many people. That unfortunately has led to some of these uh, advertisers that you get for all these companies that are doing telemedicine. Some are good, some aren't.
Teledocs, like I like to call them.
There's a lot of them out there, big companies, and I call those the cherry pickers. What they do is they pick the low hanging fruit. They only want the easy cases, which is fine. But if you're remotely complex, they kind of gaslight you a little bit, because it's not again, the business model is volume. They have to do volume because they're charging like a $40 a month fee, and they can't make money unless they're doing tons of volume. And it works for a lot, but it doesn't work for some. So again, it raises awareness. So as JJ, our friend JJ Virgin always says, the rising tide lifts all boats. The more that women are talking about it, the more women are going to get help, which is ultimately a great result.
Hmm. Yeah, I agree with you. I think there's a time and place, and maybe some people might need those very simple
Yeah.
protocols, but sometimes they might need to dig a little bit deeper. Um, what can you say that has been your experience, the difference between integrative and traditional medicine?
For me, the integrative piece means that I surround myself with a team of people that I can refer to. So, like acupuncture, chiropractic. I have learned the people in my community that might be able to help where I can't. And also, part of integrative medicine is like, I might tell a woman who's having heavy periods to use yarrow flower,
Hmm.
but I also do robotic surgery. So that's, for me, it's like I got one foot here and one foot there. Um, and that's really what drew me to the integrated part, was just when my mom passed away from ovarian cancer. I knew all about the disease. I knew the surgery. I knew the chemo. I knew all the stuff. What I realized when she had that 5 year between her diagnosis and her death was that I couldn't help her live her life. I couldn't help her through, the aches and pains, the sleepless nights, because they wouldn't give her hormones. And I felt, as I'm an only child and a son, and I was like, I can't even help my own mom. How am I going to help other women? And it was kind of this, if one good thing came out of her death, it was the fact that that I've been able to help all these other women through, because as you do, when you have that kind of trauma in your life, you go on your own little spiritual quest. And part of that was the integrated medicine program at the University of Arizona. And serendipity, you meet people, you bump into people. I found the Mindshare group, and that helped me grow a little bit. And then you outgrow things, and then you move in different directions, or things pique your interest and you go over here. But it's just that constant quest of just exploration, I guess. And for me, that integrative medicine piece, I spent some time in South America living with indigenous shamans, just trying to get out the box, just, and it's scary because we have medical boards and they are harsh. And so you still, like, if I prescribe liothyronine for somebody who doesn't have overt hypothyroidism, am I going to get, if she goes to see an endocrinologist, is that person going to report me? And then you got to defend yourself. And it's a really scary place to be. But you put yourself out there because you feel it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, I feel like above all is you want to help people.
Hmm.
And I'm so sorry for your loss.
Oh,
It's
thanks.
had to be so devastating, you being a doctor and young doctor, and you want to help people heal and to see your
Yeah.
mom in that state.
Yeah, it was 23 years ago, so I was just out of residency, maybe a couple of years. She was diagnosed when I was a second year resident. And it's, we all go through that in our own different ways, but I just kind of was like, I didn't have any siblings to talk to, and I didn't have, my parents had been divorced. So it was kind of just me. And, I had to go outside of my comfort zone to explore that. And it was interesting because at the time I was reading a book by Andrew Weil called 8 Weeks to Optimum Health. And this was 25 years ago. And he was talking about like fish oil and CoQ10. And I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. And now it's like no big deal because it's commonplace. But back then that was a big thing. And I lived in Tucson at the time. And, the program was in Tucson. So it was like weird how things aligned. Like it just was easy for me to, like if I lived in Austin, I probably wouldn't have done it because it's too far away. But I just happened to live there. And so it was like a natural progression for me to go into that. And then there was a little 8 week section on spirituality in that group. And that's what pushed me into the PhD part was I just needed to learn more. And as a person that, you know how it is, when you're in traditional education, you like education. So I was like, oh, I'll just spend another $100,000 on a PhD. And it was actually in philosophy, but I focused on the mind body connection. And that's why I was like, I'm going to go to Brazil and I'm going to go to Peru and I'm going to go to these different places and study with these healers that really know a lot more about life than we do. You know, I mean, we think our medicine is so much better. It's been around for 200 years and theirs has been around for thousands.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing. I went to visit a rainforest once, and the natives were talking about all of the different plants that they used for like eczema
Yeah.
and fever, and they were just pointing stuff out. I'd never heard of it.
And
Um,
you know, a lot of our medicines come from those plants. Like a company
Absolutely.
will, somebody from Wyeth or something will go to the rainforest and they'll say, "Oh, they're treating eczema with that." Wonder, and they'll take the plant and they'll look at it and they'll hone it down and then they make it 100 times stronger, which is why it has the complications. But yeah, that's where we get stuff from. So to just blow them off and say they don't know what they're doing is kind of ridiculous.
Yeah, I feel like there's so many undiscovered things sitting inside of a
Yeah.
rainforest and so many things, beyond even hormones that can help women, right? To balance their hormones. I know you have this shines protocol,
Mm-hmm.
which I thought was brilliant.
Oh, thanks.
Spirituality, hormones, infoceuticals, nutrition, exercise, supplements. Can you talk us through some of that, how you utilize that for women to help them get into balance? Because I know some doctors will be like, here's your hormone prescription, bye.
Yeah.
But there's so much more that we can do to really bring about healing, right?
It depends on the patient. People are receptive to different things, but I wanted to have options that women could do. So, like, so the book is laid out. Let's say I'm doing like estrogen dominance or the queen. A spiritual practice for a queen, you can be two types of queens. You can be a benevolent queen. You can be an off with
Mm.
their head type queen, and but a good queen surrounds herself with good advisors, so that would be your friends, your family. So a spiritual practice for a queen would be to surround yourself with good friends, do things with people that are aligned with the way that you think. Hormones could be something like adding progesterone to offset the estrogen. Infoceuticals are interesting because I wanted to incorporate what I call my 20% woo factor. And we have a friend, Harry Massey, who has a company called NES Health, and he was imbuing water with this energetic aspect, like acupuncture. And one of the things that I was using with hormones was sending people to get acupuncture, and I needed an eye for my protocol. So it just fit perfectly. But I also include like uh, essential oils, acupuncture, massage, things that work energetically on the body. The N for like a queen nutrition is going to be to obviously limit like soy products and phytoestrogens, to increase fiber, things like that to help your body naturally detoxify the estrogens. Exercise for a queen, you know, you're going to just need to move your body. A lot of women, especially in estrogen dominant states where they're obese, need to lose a little weight, you know, and it doesn't have to be running. It can be walking and stuff. And then the something like supplements, you know, calcium D-glucarate, DIM for some women. And I just, what I wanted it to be was there's 6 things, but 5 of them you can do on your own. The only time you need me is if you want hormones to help with that. It's just to me, it's like more empowering. And also, it was nice to dive more deep into each of those little things. As you know, a book takes a couple of years to kind of get out to the market. So it was a journey. And it's funny because the first draft I gave to the publisher, they hated it.
Really?
Well, it was just, how editors are. They just thought it was something. They said they had a different vision. My Virgo, they hated it. Oh, it was horrible. It was so dark, and I had to go to bed for like 2 days. But what ended up coming out was a lot better. It really was, and they know what they're doing. Those editors, they really have a good vision, and they know what they're doing. But yeah, it was just a way for me to give women more options.
Yeah, I love that. There's a lot of things we can absolutely do on our own. I know
Yeah,
fiber for me was a big game changer where
simple.
I didn't have to really think about that in my younger days or weightlifting, but as your hormones
Yeah.
change, a lot of these habits can be very
Yep.
supportive. So I appreciate you putting all of that in your book as well.
Thanks.
How can you help when other physicians have simply put women on birth control and said, here you go?
That's a lot of patience. It happens all the time from things like I had a 52-year-old on birth control the other day because
Wow.
she was in menopause and that's what they put her on. Obviously, a lot of young girls are on birth control. I always say birth control isn't a devil. If you need it for birth control, it's good because that's what it does. But if they're treating you for endo, for fibroids, for heavy periods, for PCOS, it's just not a great option because we're just covering it up. We're not actually getting to the problem. I hate using root cause because it's been overused, but technically that's what we're doing. We're trying to figure out what's
Yeah.
going on. And the problem with women on birth control pills, let's say a perimenopausal woman or a menopausal woman, mostly perimenopause, but is that when you take a birth control pill, it shuts down your HPA, your hypothalamic pituitary axis. So your estrogen and progesterone levels are worthless because they're going to be zero. Um, but you can look at estrogen, or you can look at testosterone, you can look at thyroid. And as we know, ethinyl estradiol is going to drive down free T3 and free testosterone. So it's definitely something to look at. What I try to do if they're only being treated for like a problem, like heavy periods, say, would be to get them off the pill for probably a month or two, try to wait for them to have a normal cycle and then draw their blood around day 21. But not all women cycle right away. It might take 9 months. And so for those women, I'll give them maybe 6 to 8 weeks of a washout, and then I'll draw their blood and just see where we're at. And it might take 3 to 6 to 9 months to really figure out what's going on. But if I see a young girl who's on birth control pills because she had bad periods, which happens a lot. Ever since the age of 12, she's just had horrible
Yeah.
periods. She's usually suffering from prostaglandin issues. It's just, and that's why the pills work because they shut your prostaglandin production down. But maca, fish oil, and magnesium might do the same thing.
Oh my gosh, yeah, even just magnesium has
Yeah.
been such a game changer for so many women
50
I
to
know.
75% reduction sometimes in their pain. I
Yeah,
mean, it's like amazing.
yeah, and I recently did a bit of a deep dive for my IBS book and into just birth control, kind of a refresh. I did some research, PubMed
Hmm.
nerding out like many moons ago, but in the last few years, research has come out that birth control pills do increase the risk of thyroid disorders. So
Hmm.
if you don't need to be on them, then, sometimes you do, sometimes you want to be on them, and maybe the alternatives might not be the best for you, but also that the drospirenone containing birth controls increase the risk for irritable bowel syndrome.
Hmm.
And I feel like that's not oftentimes, you're kind of trying to mask PCOS or you're trying to mask menstrual pain, and you can actually increase the risk for somebody to have IBS or to have thyroid disorders.
And you find it fascinating that in a birth control pill, you got ethinyl estradiol, and then you have these progestins.
Yeah.
I find it fascinating that ethinyl estradiol is always in a birth control pill, but the progestins, they're always changing generations. They're spending so much money to patent new
Yep.
progestins. Why don't they just put the money into progesterone, which is native to your body? Why can't we make a birth control pill that has bioidentical estrogen and progesterone? I really don't know why. I don't know why they couldn't do it, except for they couldn't patent it.
Yeah, that makes sense. I know these days there's so many different options for young women. There's the cycle tracking apps
Yep.
and things that can be very helpful. And it's really knowing your body is so important as a woman, and knowing when you're ovulating, and the
Yep.
fact that you can only get pregnant within a few days
Yep.
before and after.
Well, we used to tell kids that because we didn't want them to get pregnant. They just, if you just think you can get pregnant every day, then you won't have sex. But that didn't work out too well.
That did not work
No,
out very well. Like, I feel like the was it Scared Straight or abstinence programs,
abstinence. Yeah, that
education.
worked out well.
Yeah, yeah, that did not work out so well.
Apparently, they forgot what it was like to be a teenager.
I think the road to hell is paved with good intentions,
It
isn't
is.
it?
Yep. You're definitely right there. I have a daughter and three boys. And I was always just like, for my daughter, probably like 16, I was like, birth control pills, they're okay. You can take them for birth control. And then my sons, I was just like throwing condoms at them every 5 minutes because it's like, just don't have a kid, avoid it. But if you don't have parents that are willing to talk about it, and I do think birth control pills are probably the number one overprescribed medication in women. Again, not for birth control issues, but for all the other stuff migraines. My daughter has migraines. They're catamenial. They happen in her luteal phase. She just had one yesterday, and they want to put her on birth control pills. And I'm like, well, why don't we look at your labs in that phase of your cycle? Maybe your progesterone's low.
Yeah.
We know progesterone stabilizes blood vessels in the brain. We used it for traumatic brain injuries. And I can't tell you how many times I've seen migraines get better just by giving progesterone in the luteal phase.
Oh my gosh, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
So helpful. Yeah, there's just a lot of things that I feel like bioidentical hormones can be really helpful with. I know when I was newly postpartum, you and I were talking about progesterone, using that for postpartum,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
And that can be a game changer for postpartum depression,
We
right?
think we think possibly that part of the postpartum depression is when you are pregnant, you are riding that progesterone high. I mean, it's like through
Yeah.
the roof. And then all of a sudden you deliver and the placenta comes out and your progesterone just falls off the planet. And that massive shift. PMS is where you just have that irritability and anxiety and stuff. That's also the progesterone drop. Some women are very, very sensitive to that drop, and it's like they just fall off the table. In PMS, sometimes I will give a daily dose of progesterone so that you have the benefits all month, but then when you do drop in your luteal phase, you don't fall off the table.
Mm,
You're kind of caught on your way down. And to me, postpartum depression is kind of like just that, amplified by 10, because you fell off the bottom. Now you're nursing a baby, you're not sleeping, you've got all these other factors, and we still kind of, I think it's getting more attention, but I think we still just tell women, oh, you're fine, you got a baby, you should be happy. I think women help women, but the guys are still a little bit deficient in the understanding department there.
yeah, we really appreciate the work that you do for
Thank
women,
you.
and how you care for women, and how you advocate for women, and how
It,
you show up.
it's an interesting space because as a guy, in my 50s, sometimes I feel like it is a woman's world, obviously, this profession. When I joined OBGYN in the late 90s, it was half and half, and now it's about 85% female. It is you don't get the same platform sometimes. And I talked to a friend of ours, Nat Kringoudis, and she always just tells me, she's like, you just got to be you. Just be you, share your message. And I've often thought maybe I should dress up like a woman and maybe I would get a bigger platform, but I probably would make a very like, ugly female. So that I don't know if that would work out too well. But yeah, I'm just going to keep talking about it. And what I try to do is just share the stories that I hear and hope that those stories empower other women.
Yeah, I think they do. I think you're making a really big difference. I know a lot of people in my community really loved your
Thank you.
book, and they were so excited that I shared it. I'm going to put the link to your book in the show
Thank you.
notes. I'm going to put you in the spot in a little bit and ask you some
Okay.
questions that you weren't expecting.
I'm good. I
But
got it.
before we do that,
Okay.
could you tell people a little bit about where they could find more information about you, perhaps connect with
Sure.
you?
I spend a lot of time when I'm not working in the office. I have an office in Austin and I see patients in about 40 states. If you want to see where I'm licensed, my second pinned post on Instagram has all the states I'm licensed in. Shawn Tassone, MD. I'm on YouTube, Shawn Tassone, MD, and I put everything over there as well. A lot of women find me over there as well. But yeah, I spend most of my time in the office here in Austin. Dr. Shawn Tassone, drshawntassone.com is my office. But trying to see as many women as I can to get the word out and spreading the word on Instagram mostly.
I love it. So I'll put all the links in the show notes. And then you also are providing a link for us where people can take the hormonal archetype quiz.
Yeah.
And that's going to be tassonemd.com/quiz.
Yep. And like I said, it's 36 questions. And I'm still amazed at the number of women that tell me how accurate it is. I know it sounds like I'm tooting my own horn, but I majored in math in college. I didn't have any dates, obviously, but so I spent my time in math. And the questions are actually weighted on the back end. So I tried to make it as accurate as possible. But I had a woman tell me once, she emailed me, she's like, your quiz isn't very accurate. She said, it said I'm hyperthyroid, but I'm actually hypothyroid. And I emailed her back and I said, well, have you ever had your levels checked? And she said, no. And she emailed me back and she said, hey, I'm taking too much thyroid medication. And I was like, okay, well, there you go.
Oh my goodness. I know when I took the quiz, I felt very seen. I was like, oh yeah, this like really, really fits.
Thanks.
So I hope other women will check it out because it can be really helpful and a really big game changer in figuring out how to get balanced.
Thank you.
So are you ready for
ready.
my on the spot questions?
Let's do it.
What's a wellness hack that you refuse to participate in?
Oh, gosh. I was going to say cold plunging, but I actually did one.
Did you?
At first I didn't believe it. Second, I was afraid of it. And I was at a conference and they were doing it. And I was peer pressured, man. They pressured me into it. And I got in that tub and it was in the snow. So I was already freaking out. And I'll tell you what, I don't know if I would do it again, but the first 30 seconds were horrifying. And then you kind of bliss out for a couple of minutes and then it gets really cold again. But I don't think I would. I think it can stress your body out a little too much. So that is a biohack to me. People are buying all the tubs and everything.
Yeah.
I don't know. I probably won't do it again. But it was, it's like walking on coals at Tony Robbins. You got to try it once.
Yeah, I haven't tried it. My husband is a proponent. I'm like, I will modify that, but my modification is like getting into a hot bath with Epsom salts. Like that's my version of the cold plunge.
I could see Michael doing that, and I could see him enjoying it because he's so. He looks like the kind of guy that it takes a lot to rile him up. Like those of us that are a little bit more vocal, and I just sit in the thing and swore the whole time. But it's an exercise in just overcoming your fears, kind of, I think. But for some people, if you have a heart condition or something, you don't want to do it. But I did it, and I can say I checked it off.
That's nice. Yeah, a lot of our guests, and especially those with an underactive thyroid, the cold plunge is definitely on their no list, and
Yeah.
I fully respect
Oh
that.
gosh, yes.
And I know that it works really well for other people. My husband like sits in our pool and then he hums and sings and chants.
I can see him doing
Yeah,
that. Yeah.
he's into all the weird biohacky things, so
Gotta try it. Gotta have
he
those
enjoys a
people
lot
out
of
there.
those.
Yeah.
Most outlandish thing that you've ever tried for your health?
Outlandish, huh? You're gonna find out I'm not super crazy, but when I was in with the peyote shamans in Guatemala, I did peyote
Oh wow.
because you have to do peyote to harvest. They won't let you do it, and they tell you have to die. And I didn't really think about what that meant. I was like, okay. So they made me go dig my own grave. And then at night they put you in the grave and they cover you up and you have to stay in there all night and you're not allowed to come out until the morning. And so they hit me with peyote before I got in because I didn't know they were going to do that. And in my typical rebellious fashion, I was like, well, I'm just going to they say you can bring in whatever you want. You can bring in whatever you want. So I brought in a book. I brought in a flashlight. I was going to be camping out in there. First thing I realized when I turned the light on was that I didn't dig my grave big enough because I cut some corners, which was a lesson to be learned. And I was freaking out because it was so tight that and then the peyote hit and I was like, it was, but when you're born the next day, when you're reborn, what I realized was what all the stuff that I brought in didn't matter. None of it mattered because I couldn't see any of it and I couldn't use it. But what mattered was they stayed outside and they sang all night. And those songs to me were the people that I had touched in my life that were still telling stories about me. And that's what mattered, not the stuff that I brought in. So it was a lesson learned, but that was probably the craziest thing I've ever done.
Wow. Yeah, I feel like you win the prize for that because that's intense to dig
I
your own
didn't know I was
grave.
going to have to do that but I was there and it's like, well, I might as well. I'm here, you know.
When in Rome,
It's
right?
like the cold plunge. Yeah. I was peer pressured.
um, if the supplement police came to your house and they said you have to surrender all of your supplements, but we're going to let you keep one, what would that supplement be?
Right now, I'm really kind of enjoying spermidine.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know why, to tell you the truth. I've read a lot about it. It does have some good anti-aging qualities. I was going to say metformin, but that's a prescription. So maybe I would also say maybe dihydroberberine.
Mm.
But I feel like when I take spermidine, if I take it regularly, I just feel better, less aches and pains. I do like hot yoga. I can do that more religiously. I just have more drive. It could be placebo because I know I'm taking it, but I would say that would be the one I'd want to keep.
That's been on my list of things to try. I've heard really, really good things about it.
Yeah, it's new. To be honest, the reason I was drawn to it was the name, just because it was such a weird name. It has nothing to do with sperm, obviously, really. But yeah, if anything, the thing about the longevity hacks that are interesting is we're not going to know if these things actually work until the longevity experts are dying.
Yeah.
Are they 110? Are they 55? You know, it's like the proof is in the pudding, but we got to wait to see what happens.
Yeah, when I was like 30, somebody asked me to be part of like a longevity summit or to be interviewed for it. And I'm like, I don't know. Like, what do I know about that? And then, of course, I would say Confessions of a Male Gynecologist is that you picked a supplement based on the name because you thought it had sperm in
I'm a guy and it was intriguing. I don't
it.
know how else to describe it. It was like, you laugh when you see the name and I'm like, what the heck is that? And then yeah, it sounded kind of interesting.
I love it. It called out to you.
It's expensive too. So it's not, that's probably the other reason why I'd want to keep it because I paid more for it.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. I have my like fancy Louis Vuitton purse that my husband got for me. And then like I had some Alinea, which is a very, very expensive
Yeah.
medication. And when we moved here from California, I was like, okay, Michael, these are my two most prized possessions. It's like my stockpile of Alinea, and
Yeah.
here is my purse, right?
But you got to have it in a safe.
Yep. Yep. Um, do you have any guilty pleasures that aren't doctor approved where somebody might be like, oh my gosh, is that Dr. Shawn Tassone? Is he really doing that?
Hamburgers.
Hers.
I like hamburgers like too much. Like I want to have a show on Food Network where I drive around the country for looking for the best hamburger in each state.
You know what? If you make them gluten free, I will come with you and
Now
do the show
see,
together.
so here's my other goal in life, and you will not like this one, but I want to have a restaurant in Austin called Gluten. Everything is gluten, and then there's a double gluten entree of the day. And then if that takes off, I want to have one called Sugar.
Uh-huh.
And I want to do all the things that people in Austin would just drive them crazy. And I want to sell shirts because I'm sure someone would buy a shirt that said "I love gluten" just to make people mad. But no, I would say I have to eat the gluten bun and I gotta eat the fries. But yeah, I could eat a hamburger every day.
Hmm.
I don't, but I could.
When I was pregnant with my son, I had a burger deficiency, so I needed at least 2 burgers a
I
day. Otherwise, I was just
I
very
must be
upset.
pregnant because I could do that myself. Yeah,
And as far as people coming to your restaurant, my dad would love it
there you
because
go.
he's always like, I'm gluten free, and my brother and his wife and my mom were all gluten free. We've seen a lot of health benefits, and my dad loves his gluten. And he sends us like pictures of things that he made for himself. And he goes, I put extra gluten in
Yeah.
it.
If I could have someone back me, I want to have it so it's like a speakeasy, so the door is secret
Yeah.
because people don't want to be seen going in. but not like you, but maybe some of the other biohackers that don't do, maybe they would sneak in to just have a little snack or something.
Yeah. Let me know when you open it up. I'll bring my dad.
I
He's
need
going to
more.
love it.
I need more money. Maybe it'll be a food truck to start with.
There you go.
Yeah.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
Let's make that happen.
Okay.
Dr. Shawn Tassone, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been such a pleasure to
Thank
have
you.
you. Everybody listening, I hope this has been a healing conversation for you on your journey. Until next time.